It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That's Metallicash. Well, that was back when they were actually Metallica.
Right.
When they were still cool.
Yeah, when they were good.
Yeah. Oh, to hear that come out of your mouth, that's rare.
To be fair, I still love them. Even the albums, everything but Lulu, I love. Honestly, I mean, Reload, Load, all that stuff, I'm all in. Yeah. The only one I really, really hate is Lulu. That's unlistenable. Everything else, even Saint Anger, I can pick out Dirty Window and stuff and say I like that song.
Right. Well,
so, yeah.
I think people are still trying to recover from Lulu.
Yeah, that was just unbelievably bad.
I still don't understand that.
Well, you know, Lars is an artsy guy, and he wanted to do an artsy project with an artsy fuck like Lou Reed, so he did.
And it was just bad.
Yeah, it was. It was just not... There was nothing redeemable on that. I always find it funny that the hardcore Metallica fans will say, well, you know, if you listen to this riff... No. Lulu sucks a dick. It's fucking terrible.
Well, someone who might have a little insight on Lulu and Metallica and James Hetfield is author Mark Eglinton. I think I'm saying that right. Is that right? I'm saying Mark Eglinton, right?
Eglinton. You're pretty close.
Eglinton, like eggs.
You got it, Eglinton.
Oh, okay.
That's the last time I'll tell you.
Yeah, pal.
Wow, he's getting snippy like Tim James.
Well, I've not even started with Chris yet. I had to sit through him whining about Rex last week for almost what felt like a whole hour, and now he wants me to come on here and talk about Rex's book. I need to tell Chris. I think he got Rex wrong big time. Really,
oh no,
really bad.
I didn't get Rex wrong. Rex is a douche, and I will be perfectly fair and honest with it. I love the book. Love the book, and not just because you wrote it. I mean, just the rawness of it and the way he trashed, like Vinnie Paul, is, you know, saying that Vinnie can't get pussy and stuff. Good Lord. Talk about I don't ever want to have a reunion with this guy again. That's what that is. But I respect him for what he did with the book. I don't respect him for the interactions that I've had with him.
Sure, I get it. I'm only kidding you. But so, yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to ask me about the book? Do you want me to tell you about the book? What would you like to know?
Well, before we do that, Mark, I just wanted to kind of run down your credentials here so people kind of understand who we're speaking to. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who have you worked with? Who have you written books with or about?
Well, my career, definitely not conventional, because I came into this whole writing music journalism thing really late in life. I did other things in life, ran businesses, I've been a professional caddy, I've done lots of things, and I always wanted to write books, always wanted to get into music, but could never see a way of doing it. And so what happened was I got into journalism about 10 years ago in the UK, got little bits and pieces of interviews here and there with various people, some of them heavy metal artists, some of them not. And from there it kind of mushroomed a little bit. And the real breakthrough was when I got the phone call from a publisher in the UK to write the Hetfield biography. And that kind of changed everything because it gave me, you know, a platform to write books of this kind. And that was reasonably well received. It wasn't published in the US, which is something that I felt strongly that it should be. And from there, that's where the Rex project came up, because I actually interviewed Rex for that book.
Sure. Now, we did have Rex on last week. I got the honors of speaking with him. I've never had any interaction with him before. Chris, obviously has had his dalliances with Rex at some point or another. But what surprised me about Rex, and did you hear the interview at all, Mark?
Yes, I did. I heard it. I thought it was good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I am a professional after all, but my surprise where Rex was concerned, every time I would ask him a question, he would just like, let's not talk about that. It's been well documented. Let's just move on to something else. And this is what his book was all about, but he had no interest in actually speaking about it, and that was just kind of bizarre to me. Yeah,
well, in his defense, I think he's done a lot of press. And I think he's probably, I can't listen to anything I say about the book or about Rex tonight. Bear in mind, it's like one of these Twitter headings that people write when they work for newspapers. These are my views. Okay, anything that he feels is what he feels. But he's probably at the end of quite a tough cycle of press, and I think possibly caught him at, a fairly tiring time. Normally he's pretty forthcoming with talking about his book.
Sure. Now, Mark, when you get into a project like this, and I'll start with the Rex book, even though, to be honest, I think the Rex book is probably better than the Hetfield book, but both books are just like, I'll call them quick reads, because you read them, you pick them up, and you literally read half the book at a sitting, just because it's quick, and it's, as a fan of both bands, it's obviously interesting to me.
Yeah.
But when you get into writing a book like this, clearly it's not you write it into a quick read, but it's not a quick put together, especially with the Rex book, where you had so many different people that you had to contact and get content from, and I'm sure the way it worked was you spent 4 hours with Rita Haney, and then you cut and pasted pieces around the stories that Rex told, that sort of fit in. So how does that kind of a process even work? Do you do it almost like a diagram thing where that she said this here and Rex is talking about it, or does it just sort of flow together? Because it just seems like it would be a huge project to have all of that interview material and then try and fit it all around the way that you did.
Yeah, that's a great point. And let's take the Rex book. And let me also dispel one thing. People have said to me, "Oh, you obviously wrote this book." It's not the case. Rex did an awful lot of work on this project, and people think that the ghostwriter or collaborator's role is simply to transcribe words and build them into a book. It's not. I mean, a lot of the other jobs you do as a co-writer are nothing to do with the writing. You're a kind of part-time psychologist, you're a supporter, you're a friend as well. So the writing part of it is just one small part of the equation. But on this occasion, let's just focus on the writing. This thing took us probably from start to finish close to maybe between 2 and 3 years from when we started actually sitting down talking about it to actually getting a final edit down. And that process progressed, as you say. Basically, Rex and I would sit down, we'd do, I don't know, maybe 10 hours of interviews. I'd then go back and nobody speaks from point A to point Z in any conversation. So it's not like I had a narrative that ran, time-wise. I would then have to go back through these tapes and try and put it into order, picking out segments that went off at tangents and tying it all together. So that takes a long time in itself, just to even get Rex's main voice, which is, which underpins the book. Then when you start trying to build in other people's voices, like, as you say, Rita Haney, Walter O'Brien, anyone else that's involved, yeah, you do. What you have to do is get their stuff, and I probably interviewed them for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours each, and then fit that around Rex's narrative. And it is a very, very long process.
Sure. Now, how do you delineate where Rex's words stop and your interpretation of what he's trying to say begins? That's always an interesting question for me, just because, when you see written by Rex Brown with Mark Eglinton, it's like, okay, who wrote what, I guess, as a fan, always comes into my head.
Yeah, I think the best way of putting it is a pure collaboration. Rex has his strengths, many of them. I've got mine. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. Rex's probably wouldn't be to sit behind a laptop typing. Mine, I don't have some of the other skills he has. But basically, all the transcribed interviews, and what I do is I interview Rex, and while I'm interviewing, I'm not just asking him bland questions, what did you do back in 1989 or something like that. I'm trying to actually get feelings out of him and trying to get him to really go deep into what he was feeling at a certain time, because that's what makes reading books like this most interesting. We know the facts. You can go onto the internet and you know what Pantera did in whatever year, but you don't know how he felt. So I had to go into that with him. I'd take his raw transcripts from tape, build it into text. At that point, you've got every pause, every stutter, every sentence that didn't end, all that kind of thing. And then my job kicks in at that point, where I'm basically smoothing it out into readable material. But the key at that point is not to lose Rex's voice. There's no point in me writing his book, because it isn't me and I didn't live his life. So there's that really fine balance between making sure it's smooth, making sure it reads, but also that if somebody picked it up and, you know, saw Rex Brown on the cover, they want to read it and say, that's Rex talking. And I think we got that.
Well, Mark, how did you get involved with Rex to begin with to even write this book? As part of my questions last week, I asked him, you know, at what point did you decide this was the time to write the book? And he was just like, well, I was approached numerous times over the years, and it was always no. So did you approach him, or did he approach you, or how did that come to pass?
He might have been approached over the years, but I have to say it was never by me. What happened was, as I said earlier, I interviewed him for the Hetfield book because I thought he'd be a good voice, because they had a relationship, good friend relationship while Darren was touring with Metallica. So I thought, here's someone great to talk to. And to be fair, Rex was great for that interview. And I thought, here's a really nice guy. Also, the first thing you think of is, okay, Pantera, there's a really emotive subject. There's a book that's not been written. Is this something that we could do? And I remember I put it out to him once and said, would you ever consider doing a book? And he was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe one day. Then I think about a week later, he called me at 3 in the morning. I was in the UK at the time, and said, let's do this book. And I said, well, that's great, but let's wait until the morning and we'll talk about it properly and all that kind of thing. But yeah, he called me and said, let's do it.
Do you know why? Do you know what spurred him to go, hey, I think this is the time to call up Mark and let's do this thing?
I don't know. I think I put the thought in his head, and I think, as you say, he probably had it in there. And all these things just need something they just need a catalyst to. It could be anything. It could be something emotional that made him think, listen, I need to deal with this. And, you know, I do think there's a big part of Rex, and again, I'm just speaking from my interpretation of what he said and how we've interacted. I think this, for him, has been cathartic. He said that in interviews, and I think he needed to do this in order to move forward with his life for lots of different reasons. You know, and the longer you put that off, the harder it is to do. And I think he probably got to a point where he thought, right, you know, I need to do this. It's going to take time. At least let's get it started.
Right. Well, you mentioned the fact that you wrote a book about James Hetfield, and first of all, how did you get to a point to where you could write a book that would allow you access to people such as a James Hetfield or even a Rex Brown and so on and so forth?
Well, first of all, the Hetfield book was unauthorized, so that was, you know, no involvement with James whatsoever. Although I did try, got nowhere, got absolutely nowhere with Metallica and Q Prime, and they're very nice people, but, you know, they're also extremely protective of their artists, so there was nothing doing there. So what I had to do on that occasion was, in order to make it a decent book, it needed new material, and it needed, you know, the voice of people who hadn't spoken before. So there was guys in that book like Hugh Tanner, who was, you know, not officially a member of Metallica at the beginning, but he certainly played guitar with James in their bedrooms when they were teenagers and all of that. He'd never talked before. So I seeked him down. I can't remember how I got him. And there was a few other people like that. And in the same process was, you know, have my main narrative being me talking about James and then building in these little interviews with other people. And that's how that took place. Do I know? I did hear from Metallica. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Stefan Shirazi, who writes the fanzine, that they are aware of the book and there's not been anything negative said. So, you know, that's good enough for me on that one.
Well, at what point, I mean, when you come to a point and decide, hey, I want to write a book about a James Hetfield or a Dave Mustaine or whomever it might be, what is it that goes through your mind that says, hey, I want to write a book that's unauthorized about them? What do you have to say? I mean, what input or insight do you have about that subject that hasn't been written about before or been chronicled before? Or what is it that your motivation is, I guess?
Well, I have to take Hetfield in isolation and say that I was approached to write that. I've always been a music fan, always been a big heavy metal fan all the way through my life. I've written about heavy metal for websites, etc. I was lucky, actually, with the Hetfield book when they approached me, because they were a small UK publisher. They needed somebody to do it quickly, and I think the turnaround was 3 months, which is nothing for writing a book. And they said, can you do this? And I said, well, I'll do it. So I felt that most people knew about the music that Metallica had made and the part that James had in it. I didn't think many people knew much about the personal side of him. And while you can't go too deep into that, and you have to be very careful what you say, and you have to be, the best word, judicious about what aspects of his personal life you choose to discuss. I do think that if you can reveal a little bit about the person by speaking to other people, I think you can come up with a pretty good portrait of somebody. And I think, again, in that instance, that probably worked out. There was stuff that we had to leave out for legal reasons. There always is. But I think on balance, it was a pretty good biography.
Sure, absolutely. Well, are you a fan of the Classic Metal Show at all, or do you ever listen to Chris and I?
I've got to tell you, and I say this without hesitation, this might be the pinnacle of my radio career, because I've sat there listening to Eric Braverman, my good friend, listened to him and thought one day I'd like to be on that show. And I know that you thought I had been on that show before, and I really hadn't been. You did ask me in the past. I could never make it on, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the show, and always tune in when I can.
Well, I appreciate that, believe me.
No problem.
So I know Chris and I, we go off the deep end sometimes and do some goofy stuff of our own, and we all have our own opinion, and you have your outlet with your writing, and we have our outlet with our just blabbering on the weekend. So maybe we'll write a book one day.
That would be a good book. That would be a great book. You're pretty quiet there, Chris. I need some more of your input. What are you saying? You're just sitting quietly because you don't want to talk about Rex.
Chris has left the mic for a minute, so
I'll let him off.
So he'll be back.
That's no problem. But Joe, what is your feedback? I mean, having read the Pantera book, are you a big fan of Pantera, Neely?
Yes, I am. I got to actually see them. I'm glad I got to see them. When they were still around. Mm-hmm. And, they definitely defined a whole genre of music. I mean, they were, if you want to call it, the godfathers of extreme metal, next to Slayer, but in a new vein, I guess, being that they became popular in the early 90s. Their popularity came in the 90s, and, they ushered in that whole era of quote-unquote extreme metal, if you will. And, I got to tip my hat to that, because not only was it extreme, but it was also melodic. And that's a big thing for me, personally, when I listen to something. I can't listen to the Cookie Monster growling music much, because it just doesn't do anything for me. But when it comes to, the harder edge music, but it still has that melodic edge, Pantera is it for me. So it's good stuff. So I know Chris, he's a huge Pantera fan. In fact, I think I probably got more into Pantera after getting to know Chris a little more.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, Mark, let me ask you this about both books. What in both books, it seems like you got so much out of the guys that you were writing about. Was there stuff that they told you don't put in, or don't write about, or don't focus on?
Let's stick with Rex, because that was the most direct contact. Did he ever say... Yeah, I think it was a decision we both took at certain times. And my attitude to that kind of thing is always, we're looking at a bit of material, looking at something that might be contentious. My first question is, does putting this in the book actually benefit the book as a whole? Does it need to be in there? And if the answer to that is no, I would probably be inclined to leave it out. Now, a lot of people have said in some of the press that I've read about Rex's book that they feel Rex has been quite hard on Vinnie Paul. We had conversations about that, and I know Rex loves Vinnie Paul. And I don't think any of what Rex said in there was there to have a cheap shot at Vinnie or to make him look stupid. I think what Rex felt he needed to do was to try and explain a little bit about the broader picture within the band, because that was really what caused the band to break down, not just Vinnie Paul. You had all these different forces, whether it was Phil, Dime, Vinnie, or Rex, all behaving differently within the confines of the band Pantera. And I think in order to explain how things melted down, he needed to explain what each person was like. And I think, that was one of the things we had a long discussion about. It needs to be fair. He needs to also call himself on some of his failings, and I think he did that.
Sure. Now, do you or have you either personally or through Rex or the publicist or whatever, has there been blowback from either Phil's camp or Vinny's camp toward you or toward the book
itself? Not that I've heard.
None?
I've heard nothing.
Okay, interesting. So let's play devil's advocate. Let's just say that Vince wanted to write his own thing now, kind of in response to some of the allegations, both there and both in the press and everything else. I mean, would you be open to doing that as well, or would that almost be like conflict of interest for you?
Well, if I was to work with Vinny?
Yeah, if just say he wanted to do that.
I don't think so. I don't think it would be something I've lived with, Pantera. I've been involved with Philip, with Rex when they were in Down. I actually went on tour with them for a while, towards the end of when Rex was in Down. I've been around two of the band members to know enough about the dynamics that, I'm probably quite happy just to leave Pantera at this point and let the book do the rest of the talking.
Sure. Now, so where does that leave you for the next project? Are you looking to do another book? Is there a band that you're maybe talking to or interested in working with, or what?
Do you know what? I'm not 100% convinced. Well, put it this way, if the right person came along, sure. Do I always want to write books about music or with musicians? Not necessarily. I certainly don't want to be typecast into somebody whereby, any of metal edition out there was going to write a memoir. I wouldn't want my name attached to it because I think you become one-dimensional, and that's not really how I want to be. I like to think that while I can do these kind of projects, my main strength is getting material and thoughts and feelings out of anyone, whether it's a musician, whether it's a lion tamer, who knows, Eric Braverman, Chris Neely, any of these guys that want to talk. If you see what I'm saying, there's a difference. I'd like to think I could work in any different field, and I have had approaches from people other than musicians to write memoirs, and I'll keep my options very much open, and I'm very open-minded about who I work with.
But don't you think that you already almost kind of have been typecast? I mean, you've written books with basically two of the very biggest metal bands, probably two of the 5 biggest metal bands in the history of the genre.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have thought about that, but I still think that I'm early enough into what I do, and that if I did something radically different, I still think I could escape that typecast. And as I said, not to say that if somebody that really interested in me came along with a good story to tell, and it has to be the right story nowadays. Publishing books is not straightforward. I mean, some things that you think would be an automatic with a publisher aren't nowadays. It has to have the right angle. And there's not that many people out there that would get me interested in this kind of music.
Well, Mark, I'm always interested in the business side of the music industry and stuff, and I'm not looking for specific numbers or anything here. All I'm asking is, as a co-writer, co-author, whatever, how is a book deal negotiated when you're helping the subject of the book pen a book? I mean, is it a percentage split in the sales, or is it a one-time fee, or how does that work?
That can work different ways, and I would say the norm is a percentage split in the advance, which is paid when the book goes to a publisher, and then if you're lucky, you might get a split of the back-end payments, royalties. Some people might work for a flat fee, i.e., a flat fee, you'd be kicking yourself if the book really sold. If you saw what I mean. If you decided to write a book for X, and the book is, a national bestseller and translated into 15 languages, and you're not getting any kickback, you'd be disappointed. So it's kind of a numbers game to try and work out what the best way to go is. And, I have an agent who negotiates these things for me, Matthew. He's great if he's listening. And, you're just trying to position yourself, best for each given project.
Right. Well, what kind of a percentage does a co-writer get? Give me a ballpark. Of
split of advance, anywhere from 15 to 50%.
Really? Wow. Interesting.
50 would be extremely high. Let's say, 15 to 35%.
Okay, so we're looking at about a quarter.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Good.
And that varies. I mean, you get a project where somebody's just not willing to give that away.
Yeah, I understand, but I was just sort of wondering what range a co-author would work with here. That's all.
That would be you'd be pretty safe within that territory. But likewise, you might get people who are forced into doing it for a flat fee.
Right. Exactly.
Which would be a tough one.
Right.
Unless the flat fee was enormous.
Right.
Well,
and then you'd be covered, you know.
Well, since Chris is so balls deep in his personal memoirs, I might have to, hire you to write
That's
the.
That's just a hideous image, I have to tell you.
Gonna have to commission you to write the biography of the classic metal show on our 20th year.
Well, you know where I am. You can always find me. Chris is always stalking me on Facebook and LinkedIn and all these places. He knows exactly where I am. So I'd be happy to discuss that with you guys.
Now, how do you know Eric Braverman? You brought him up a couple of times.
Talking about haunting people. Eric Braverman haunts me on the phone, vice versa. When he calls, sometimes I'll answer. Other times I'll just let the answering machine pick it up, and I'm always pretty certain he will leave up between 5 and 10 minutes of continuous talking on my voicemail. And I almost don't need to speak to him for another couple of weeks. But no, Eric and I was involved with his, he and I were involved with the greatest music ever created, and how it ruined our lives, the little TV show that he did for Metal Hammer in the UK. I was involved with that. And Eric's just one of these fun guys, as you know, who is passionate about the music. He's a lot of fun. And, we've always exchanged ideas over the last few years. He helps me out with things. I help him out with things. And he's just a great guy to know.
Good deal. All right, Mark. Well, we appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us here on the Classic Metal Show, being that this is the pinnacle of your career and the radio end of it for you, as you said. But why don't you tell people where they can find you and, your websites and, wherever it is you want people to contact you?
You can find me on, I'm occasionally on Twitter, Mark Eglinton. My website is mark-eglinton.com. That's pretty much where I am, and you can email me through the website as well. And I don't do too much in the way of social media presence, but I can be found for anyone who's wanting to look for me.
Excellent. All right, Mark. Well, we appreciate it, and go pick up the book that just recently came out. We had Rex Brown on the show, Official Truth of the Pantera, 101 Proof, and he's got a book on James Hetfield, The Wolf at Metallica's Door. And it's good stuff. So, Mark, you're welcome on the show anytime.
Very kind of you to have me on. I really appreciate it, and I'll keep on tuning in every week.
Excellent. We appreciate the support.
You've got it always. Take care, okay, guys?
All right. Well, I think we'll end this interview with some Pantera. What do you think?
Do it. Let's do it.
What would you like to hear? What album? What song?
Have you got them all?
I've got them all.
Favorite album for me is Reinventing the Steel.
Okay.
Favorite song of all time is Goddamn Electric. If you can spin that one for me, I'd be delighted.
Okay, we can do that. Well, go check out Mark over at his website at mark-eglinton. That's EGLINTON.com.
You got it.
And visit him, and let's jump into some Pantera. This comes from the Reinventing the Steel release, and this is Goddamn Electric exclusively here
on your Classic Metal Show.